You know how people say an omega is the lowest creature in the hierarchy, useful for nothing but cleaning floors and taking abuse. But in the frozen woods of the Blackwood Ridge Pack, something strange was happening. 3 starving, orphaned pups, the kind the pack usually forgets, weren't following the alpha. They weren't following the beta. They were trailing a broken, silent omega named Ariana everywhere she went, like a shadow, like a lifeline. Nobody noticed until the Alpha King arrived to conduct a purge. He saw the line of ducklings following the wrong mother, and when he followed them into the dark, he didn't just find a secret. He found a crime that would burn the werewolf world to the ground. This is the story of the king who knelt for an omega. The kitchen of the Blackwood Ridge Pack house smelled of bleach, boiled cabbage, and old grease. For Ariana, it smelled like survival. She was 23, though her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice that age. Her hands, red and chapped from the harsh detergents, scrubbed the industrial countertop with a mechanical rhythm. It was 11 p.m. The pack dinner was over. The high-ranking wolves, the warriors, the favored lovers, the elite, were upstairs, full of roast beef and red wine, laughing near the fireplaces. Down here, it was freezing. The heating vents in the servants' quarters had been broken for 3 years. "Hurry up, Mutt!" The head cook, a heavy-set beta named Roach, growled as he passed by. He kicked Ariana's shin, not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to bruise. It was a casual cruelty. "Inventory needs to be done before you sleep." "Yes, sir," Ariana whispered, keeping her eyes on the granite. She waited until the heavy steel door swung shut behind him. She waited another 10 seconds, counting the beats of her own racing heart. Then she moved. Her demeanor changed instantly. The slow, submissive slump vanished. She reached under the lip of the oversized sink and pulled out a bundle wrapped in a grease-stained napkin. Inside were the scraps she had managed to pawn during the dinner rush: 3 lukewarm dinner rolls, the gristle cut off a steak, and a half-eaten apple. She shoved the bundle into the pocket of her oversized grey hoodie, the uniform of the Omegas, and slipped out the back door. The wind outside was a physical blow. Blackwood Ridge was located in the Northern Territories, where the snow didn't melt until May. Ariana shivered, the cold biting through her thin leggings, but she didn't run. Running attracted attention. Predators chased things that ran. She walked with a purposeful trudging pace toward the edge of the forest, near the old, dilapidated equipment sheds. As she approached the darkness of the tree line, she didn't call out. She didn't have to. A rustle in the bushes, then another. 3 pairs of glowing eyes appeared in the gloom. First was Liam. He was 7, the oldest, but his ribs showed through his tattered shirt. Then Noah, 5, whose left ear was permanently notched from a discipline session with the beta. And finally, clutching Noah's hand, was little Chloe, only 3 years old. They didn't look like pack children. They looked like ghosts. "Ariana," Liam breathed, his voice cracking. Ariana dropped to her knees in the snow, ignoring the wet cold soaking into her jeans. I'm here. She pulled the napkin from her pocket. The moment the smell of food hit the air, the pups whimpered. It was a heart-breaking sound, the sound of hunger that had gone on too long. "Slowly," Ariana warned gently, breaking the rolls into pieces. "Noah, chew. Chloe, here, take the apple slices." She watched them eat with a fierce, protective ache in her chest. These weren't her children. She had never been mated, never birthed a pup. They were the reject batch, children of wolves who had either died in skirmishes or had been exiled. In a cruel pack like Blackwood, led by the sadistic Alpha Barrack, orphans were a burden. They were fed last, housed in the leaky sheds, and often used as target practice for the young warriors in training. Did they hit you today? Liam asked, pausing mid-bite. His eyes, intelligent and angry, scanned Ariana's face. He saw the fresh swelling on her cheekbone where Roach had backhanded her earlier. I fell, Ariana lied. You always fall, Noah mumbled, shoving steak gristle into his mouth. Eat, Ariana commanded softly. The king arrives tomorrow. You know what that means. The mood shifted instantly. The air grew heavy. Alpha King Silvio. The name alone made grown alphas sweat. He was the ruler of all packs on the continent, the enforcer of the old laws. He was rumored to be 7 feet tall in his human form, a man who had executed 3 corrupt alphas in the last year alone. Will he kill us? Chloe whispered, her eyes wide and watery. Ariana pulled the little girl into her arms, burying her nose in Chloe's matted, dirty hair. No, but Alpha Barrack, he wants the pack to look perfect. He doesn't want the king to see this. She gestured to the shed, to their rags. You have to stay hidden. You have to stay in the woods until I come for you tomorrow night. Do not come to the main house. Promise me. We promise, Liam said, though he looked at the main house with a glare that promised retribution one day. Ariana kissed their foreheads, her heart hammering. Go, deep in the brush, where I showed you. She watched them scurry away, 3 small shadows vanishing into the winter night. What Ariana didn't know was that she hadn't been careful enough. From the 3rd-story balcony of the pack house, a cigarette glowed in the dark. Alpha Barrack stood there, watching the Omega return from the woods. She's feeding the rats again, Barrack muttered. Beside him, his beta, a cruel man named Gideon, chuckled. Do you want me to handle it? No, Barrack said, flicking the cigarette ash over the railing. The king arrives at dawn. We can't have a dead Omega causing a stink. Let her fatten them up. Once Silvio leaves, we'll use the pups for the hunting drill. The new recruits need live targets. The arrival of the Alpha King was not a parade. It was a thunderstorm. A convoy of 5 black armored SUVs tore up the gravel driveway of Blackwood Ridge at 6 a.m. sharp. The sky was still the color of a bruise, grey and purple. The entire pack was assembled in the courtyard. 200 wolves stood in formation, shivering in the cold. Alpha Barrack stood at the front, flanked by Gideon and his warriors. They wore their best leather jackets, their boots polished. They looked strong. They looked disciplined. Ariana stood in the back row, hidden behind the bulk of the kitchen staff. She kept her head down, her hands clasped behind her back to hide the tremors. The lead SUV door opened. First came the enforcers, huge masked warriors who moved with military precision. They fanned out, securing the perimeter. Then he stepped out. Alpha King Silvio. He was imposing, radiating a power that made the air feel thin. He didn't wear a suit. He wore dark, tactical cargo pants and a thick black sweater that clung to broad, powerful shoulders. His face was sharp, defined by a jawline that looked carved from granite, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He didn't look like a politician. He looked like a weapon. Barrack stepped forward, bowing his neck, a display of submission that looked painful for him. King Silvio, welcome to Blackwood Ridge. We are honored. Silvio didn't bow back. He didn't even smile. He walked right past Barrack, his boots crunching on the frozen gravel. He walked down the line of warriors, inspecting them. Your numbers are down, Barrack, Silvio said, his voice a deep baritone that carried without shouting. Your financial reports say you're thriving, yet your perimeter fences are rusting. It's been a harsh winter, my king, Barrack said, sweating despite the cold. Funds have been diverted to heating and food. Silvio stopped. He turned slowly to face Barrack. Is that so? Silvio sniffed the air. To a werewolf, scent is truth. Words lie. Pheromones don't. Silvio smelled fear. That was normal. He smelled aggression. That was typical for a border pack. But beneath that, he smelled something else. Rot. The scent of sickness, of untreated infection, of misery so deep it soured the air. "Tor," Silvio commanded. "Now." The inspection lasted hours. Barrick led the king through the renovated training halls, the polished meeting rooms, and the guest quarters. It was a curated performance. But Silvio wasn't looking at the walls. He was looking at the people. He noticed how the Omegas flinched when Barrick raised his hand to point at something. He noticed how the women of the pack wouldn't meet his eyes. By early afternoon, they were walking across the courtyard toward the dining hall. Silvio was growing bored and increasingly suspicious. That was when he saw it. Ariana was crossing the courtyard, carrying a heavy crate of vegetables from the delivery truck to the kitchen. She was struggling under the weight, her small frame bowing, and behind her were 3 distinct disturbances in the snow. Silvio had vision sharper than an eagle's. He saw the bushes at the edge of the courtyard rustle. He saw a small, dirty face peek out. Liam. Then another. Chloe. They were shadowing her. As Ariana moved 5 steps to the left, the bushes rustled 5 steps to the left. When she stopped to adjust her grip, the movement in the bushes froze. It was a formation, a tactical escort, or a duckling imprint. "Who is that?" Silvio asked, stopping dead in his tracks. Barrick blinked, following the king's gaze. "That? That is just Ariana, a kitchen Omega. She's feeble-minded, my king, useless." "And the children in the bushes?" Silvio asked calmly. Barrick froze. The blood drained from his face. "Children? I don't see any children. Our pups are in the schoolhouse." Silvio turned his head slowly, his predator eyes locking onto Barrick. "Do not lie to me, Barrick. I hear 3 heartbeats in that brush. They are syncing their breathing to hers." Silvio took a step toward Ariana. Barrick panicked. "My king, please, let's not waste time on the help. The banquet is prepared." "Silence." The word was a whip crack. Silvio walked across the courtyard. The snow crunched under his boots. The entire courtyard went silent. Every eye was on the king, walking toward the lowest wolf in the pack. Ariana didn't see him coming until his shadow fell over her. She gasped, nearly dropping the crate. She caught it, her knuckles white, and immediately dropped her gaze to his boots. "Alpha King," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Put the crate down," Silvio said. His voice wasn't angry, but it commanded total obedience. Ariana set the crate down on the frozen ground. She kept her eyes on her own battered sneakers. "Look at me." She hesitated. To look an Alpha King in the eye was a challenge. It could get her killed. "Ariana," he said, his voice dropping an octave, softer now. "Look at me." She slowly lifted her head. Silvio felt a jolt in his chest that he hadn't felt in a decade. Her eyes were a stunning, vivid violet, a rare color. But they were surrounded by dark circles, and her left cheekbone was an ugly shade of purple and yellow. She was beautiful, in a tragic, shattered way. But Silvio wasn't focused on her beauty. He was focused on the fact that she smelled like milk and dried blood. "Why are they following you?" Silvio asked quietly, tilting his head toward the bushes 20 yards away. Ariana's heart stopped. She knew if she revealed them, Barrick would kill them the moment the king left. I don't know what you mean, my king," she stammered. "I am alone." Silvio narrowed his eyes. He took a step closer, invading her personal space. He leaned down, his nose brushing the curve of her neck. He inhaled deeply. He smelled the 3 distinct scents of the pups on her clothes. He smelled their fear, and he smelled her fierce, overwhelming, protective instinct. It was so strong it almost choked him. He pulled back, looking into her terrified violet eyes. "You are lying to protect them," Silvio stated. "Why?" Before Ariana could answer, Barrick and Gideon came rushing over. "My king!" Barrick barked, his voice loud and fake. "Forgive this interruption. This Omega is known for hallucinating. She thinks she has friends in the woods. It's pathetic, really. Ariana, get back to the kitchen before I have you skinned." At the sound of Barrick's threat, something incredible happened. A low, tiny growl erupted from the bushes. It was pathetic, weak, like a kitten trying to roar. But it was distinct. Liam burst out of the bushes. He was 7 years old, starving, shaking with cold, holding a sharp stick. He ran, not away from the danger, but toward it. He ran and stood in front of Ariana, pointing the stick at the Alpha King and Alpha Barrick. "Leave her alone!" Liam screamed, his voice high and terrified. "Don't you touch her!" Then Noah ran out, grabbing a handful of gravel. And finally, little Chloe, wailing, wrapped her arms around Ariana's leg. The entire pack watched in stunned silence. 3 orphaned runts were standing off against the most powerful wolf in the world to protect a kitchen servant. Silvio looked at the boy with the stick. He looked at the trembling girl. He looked at Ariana, who had immediately dropped to her knees to shield the children with her own body, exposing her back to the Alphas to take the blow she thought was coming. "Please," Ariana begged, tears spilling over. "Please, my king, they are just children. Punish me. Kill me. Just let them go." Silvio looked at Barrick. The king's face had gone void of all expression. It was the face of death. "Barrick," Silvio said softly. "Yes, my king? You told me the orphans were housed in the West Wing dormitory." Well, there was a mix-up." Silvio turned back to Ariana. He reached out a hand. Ariana flinched violently, closing her eyes, expecting a strike. Instead, Silvio's large, warm hand cupped her uninjured cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear. "Stand up, Ariana," Silvio said. He looked at the boy. "Liam, put the stick down, little warrior. I am not going to hurt her." Silvio straightened to his full height. He unzipped his tactical jacket. The pack gasped. To remove armor was a sign of comfort, or a sign that the fight was already over. He took the jacket off and draped it over Ariana's shoulders. It was huge on her, swallowing her frame, instantly enveloping her in his scent, cedar, rain, and power. "This inspection is over," Silvio announced, his voice booming across the courtyard. "The investigation has begun." He looked at Barrick with eyes that promised hellfire. "Prepare the guest house," Silvio ordered. "Ariana and the children will sleep there tonight." "But she is an Omega," Gideon protested stupidly. Silvio turned to Gideon. "Tonight, she sleeps under my protection. If anyone approaches her door, I will mount their head on the gate. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal," Gideon squeaked. Silvio looked back at Ariana, who was trembling in his jacket, holding the 3 children. "Follow me," he said to her. And for the first time in the history of Blackwood Ridge, the Omega didn't walk behind the pack. She walked beside the king. The guest house at Blackwood Ridge was reserved for visiting dignitaries, usually other alphas or wealthy investors. It had radiant floor heating, a fully stocked refrigerator, and beds with duvets thick enough to drown in. To Ariana and the pups, it was an alien planet. Silvio closed the heavy oak door, locking the world out. He turned to face them. The 3 children were huddled together on a Persian rug near the fireplace, staring at the flames as if they were magic. Ariana stood awkwardly near the wall, still wrapped in Silvio's massive tactical jacket. She was shivering, not from cold anymore, but from the adrenaline crash. "Sit," Silvio said gently, gesturing to the velvet sofa. Ariana hesitated. I shouldn't sit on the furniture, my king. My clothes are filthy. Silvio felt a muscle in his jaw twitch. The furniture can be replaced. You cannot. Sit. She sat on the very edge of the cushion, ready to bolt. Silvio moved to the kitchenette. He didn't call for a servant. He opened the fridge himself, pulling out roast chicken, cheese, milk, and bread. He plated the food with efficient, military movements. He placed the platter on the coffee table in front of the children. "Eat," he said. He didn't have to say it twice. Noah and Chloe lunged for the chicken. Liam, ever the protector, waited a second, watching Silvio's hands for sudden movements, before grabbing a drumstick and handing it to his little brother. Silvio watched them for a moment, his heart heavy. Then he turned his attention to Ariana. She wasn't eating. She was watching the door. "Ariana," Silvio said. He pulled a chair opposite her and sat down, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "I need to see your injuries." Her eyes widened. She instinctively pulled the jacket tighter. "I am fine, my king. Clumsy. Just bumps and bruises. You have a fractured rib. I can hear the hitch in your breath. You have a laceration on your shin that smells infected. And your left arm." He glanced at her sleeve. "You're holding it stiffly against your side." "It's nothing," she whispered. Silvio reached out, his movement slow and telegraphed. "Let me see." Ariana trembled, but she didn't pull away this time. The command of an alpha king was hard to resist, but more than that, his scent, cedar and rain, was doing something strange to her wolf. It wasn't dominating her, it was soothing her. It felt like safety. She slowly unzipped the jacket and peeled it down her left shoulder. Silvio inhaled sharply. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Her shoulder wasn't just bruised, it was branded. Scar tissue, thick and ugly, formed a shape on her deltoid. It wasn't a pack mark. It was a letter. R burned over it was a jagged cross, an attempt to deface it. "Who did this?" Silvio asked, his voice low and dangerous. "The beta," Ariana whispered, staring at the floor. "Gideon, he said I needed to remember my place. R for runt, R for refuse." Silvio gently touched the skin around the brand. His fingers were rough, calloused from war, but his touch was feather-light. "And the cross?" "I did that," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "I tried to burn it off with a hot spoon. I didn't want to be his refuse." Silvio looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the dirt, the malnutrition, and the trauma, there was a fire in her. An Omega who tried to burn off her own slave brand was not a weak wolf. "And the children?" Silvio asked, his eyes moving to the trio devouring the cheese. "Where are their parents?" The room went silent. Even the chewing stopped. Liam looked up, his face smeared with grease. "Gone," the boy said flatly. "Alpha Barrack said they were traitors. He said they ran away and left us because they didn't want us." Ariana made a small, wounded noise. "Liam, we talked about this." "He's lying," Silvio said. He looked at Liam. "Your parents didn't leave you. Wolves do not abandon their pups. Not ever." "Barrack says they did," Liam insisted, though his lip quivered. "He says we are the spawn of cowards. That's why we live in the shed. That's why we have to work off their debt." "Debt?" Silvio repeated. "The cost of our existence," Liam recited, repeating a phrase he had clearly heard 1,000 times. Silvio stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening packlands. The snow was falling harder now. "Ariana," Silvio said, keeping his back to her. "How long have you been caring for them?" "Since the day they were put in the shed," she answered. 3 years for Liam, 2 for Noah. Chloe, I've had her since she was a baby. And how do you feed them? I steal, she admitted. I take scraps. I forage in the woods in the summer. Berries, roots. And you starve yourself, Silvio concluded. He turned around. You are severely underweight, Ariana. You have been giving them your rations. She shrugged, a small, sad motion. They are growing. I am not. Silvio walked back to her. He crouched down so he was eye level with her. You are not an Omega, Ariana. She blinked. My king? I am. I cannot shift. I have no strength. I am the lowest rank. No. Silvio shook his head. An Omega is a rank of submission. Yes. But you? You stood between a predator and his prey. You took blows to protect children who aren't yours. You defied a beta to burn a brand off your skin. His eyes searched hers. That is not the spirit of a follower. That is the spirit of a queen. Ariana felt a blush heat her neck, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Rest, Silvio commanded, standing up. There is a medical kit in the bathroom. Treat your wounds. Sleep in the bed. Tonight, the monsters stay outside. Where are you going? Ariana asked, panic flaring in her chest. Silvio grabbed his tactical vest from the chair. He checked the magazine of the silver-plated handgun holstered at his hip, a weapon for human threats, just in case. I am going to find out why Barrick has so many orphans, Silvio growled. And I am going to read the pack ledgers. If the door knocks, do not answer it unless you hear my voice. If they try to break in, scream. I will hear you. He walked out into the snow, leaving Ariana with the first feeling of hope she had known in a decade. The administrative wing of the pack house was dark, save for the emergency lights. It was 2 a.m. Silvio didn't knock. He didn't use a key. He simply kicked the door to the records room hard enough to shatter the locking mechanism. The wood splintered with a loud crack, echoing through the hallway. He stepped inside, flipping the light switch. Behind him, his second-in-command, a massive wolf named Kale, who had arrived with the rest of the King's Guard an hour ago, stepped in and closed the broken door. Watch the hall, Silvio ordered. You think they'll try something? Kyle asked, crossing his arms. Kyle was a man of few words, scarred and loyal to a fault. Barrick is cornered, Silvio muttered, moving to the rows of filing cabinets. A cornered rat bites. Silvio began pulling files. He ignored the financial records for now. He was looking for the census. Every pack was required by old law to maintain a detailed genealogy of every member, births, deaths, matings and exiles. He found the drawer marked 2020-2025. He flipped through the folders. Smith, Miller, Thorne. Here, Silvio murmured. He pulled a file. Liam Vance, parents, Marcus and Helena Vance. He scanned the document. Status, deceased. Cause of death, border skirmish with rogues. Date, November 14th, 2023. Silvio frowned. He pulled another file. Noah's parents. Status, deceased. Cause of death, border skirmish with rogues. Date, November 14th, 2023. He pulled a third. Chloe's parents. Status, deceased. Cause of death, border skirmish with rogues. Date, November 14th, 2023. Kyle, Silvio said sharply. Yeah? Look at this. Silvio tossed the files onto the desk. 3 different couples, 3 distinct bloodlines, all died on the same day. All border skirmish. Kyle picked up the papers. That's a massacre, boss. If 6 warriors died in a single day, there would have been a report sent to the council. We never received one. Exactly, Silvio said, his eyes cold. You don't lose 6 wolves in a border fight without calling for reinforcements, unless there was no fight. Silvio went back to the cabinet. He started pulling older files. He went back 5 years, 10 years. He found a pattern. Every year, on specific dates, wolves died in pairs, always powerful wolves. Always wolves with land claims or influential positions within the pack. He's culling them, Silvio realized, a sick feeling settling in his gut. Barrick isn't just neglecting the pack, he's pruning it. He kills the strong wolves who might challenge him, blames it on rogues, and then… What? What does he do with the children? He breaks them, Kyle said, his voice grim. He puts them in the sheds, makes them omegas. If you raise a child telling them their parents were traitors or cowards, they grow up with no pride. They don't challenge you. It's a dynasty built on orphans, Silvio whispered. He kept digging. He needed to find Oriana. He searched the T-section. Nothing. He searched the Omegas section. Nothing. She's not here. Silvio slammed a drawer shut. She's 23. She should be in the adult registry. Maybe she's a transfer, Kyle suggested. Bought from another pack. No, Silvio shook his head. She has the Blackwood accent. She knows the layout. She belongs here. Silvio looked around the room. His eyes landed on a dusty, locked cabinet in the corner. It was an old steel safe, the kind used for sensitive documents. Open that, Silvio pointed. Kyle didn't bother with lockpicks. He gripped the handle, his claws extending, shifting partially into his wolf form to leverage his supernatural strength. With a grunt and a screech of tearing metal, he ripped the door off its hinges. Inside was a single, thick, leather-bound book. The cover was stamped with the crest of Blackwood Ridge, a pine tree and a moon. But this crest was different. It had a gold rim. The Alpha lineage. Silvio opened the book. It contained the history of the Alpha bloodline of Blackwood. He turned to the last entry before Barrick took over. Alpha, Richter Valerius. Mate, Serafina. Offspring, 1 daughter. Silvio's finger traced the name written in elegant cursive. Teresa Ariana Valerius. Born August 12, 2002. Status, matured. Notes, heir apparent. Silvio stopped breathing. She's not an Omega, Silvio said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. She's the rightful Alpha. He read the next entry, written in Barrick's jagged handwriting. Date, October 4th, 2018. Alpha Richter and Mate Serafina. Deceased, house fire. Teresa Valerius, survived, sustained traumatic brain injury, resulting in loss of wolf spirit. Rank adjusted to Omega due to incompetence. He killed her parents, Silvio looked up at Kyle, his eyes glowing a brilliant, lethal gold. He murdered the Alpha and his mate in a fire, and he took their daughter, the heir, and convinced the pack she was brain damaged. He broke her. He turned a queen into a servant to keep her from claiming her birthright. Kyle growled, a deep rumble in his chest. That's treason, punishable by death. Death is too good for him. Silvio slammed the book shut. He has been beating the rightful Alpha of this pack for 8 years. He made her scrub floors in the house she was born to rule. Suddenly, the air outside the pack house shifted. Silvio's head snapped up. Through the window he saw movement, torches, flashlights, a lot of them. They were moving toward the guest house. He knows, Silvio said. He knows we're looking. He's making a move. On us? Kyle asked. No. Silvio pulled his handgun, checking the safety. He's not stupid enough to attack the king directly. He's going to remove the evidence. Ariana, Kyle realized. If she dies, Silvio said, moving toward the door, his voice turning into a snarl, then Barrick's claim is secure. He's going to try to finish what he started 8 years ago. Silvio burst out of the office, Kyle on his heels. Sound the alarm, Silvio roared to his enforcer. Wake the Royal Guard. I want this entire pack on its knees in 5 minutes. But Silvio didn't wait for the guard. He sprinted down the hallway, jumping the stairs 3 at a time. He burst out the front door into the snow. The guest house was 300 yards away. Surrounding it were 10 wolves in tactical gear. They weren't enforcers. They were Barrick's personal hit squad. One of them was dousing the wooden porch of the guest house with gasoline. "No!" Silvio roared. The sound was so loud, so full of alpha power, that it physically shook the snow from the trees. The man with the gas can froze, looking up. But the lighter was already falling from his hand. Whoosh! Flames erupted up the side of the wooden cottage. Inside that house were 3 children, and the woman who was etched into Silvio's soul. Silvio didn't slow down. He shifted. Mid-stride, his bones cracked and reshaped, clothes shredded. Where a man had been, a massive midnight black wolf, larger than a grizzly bear, exploded forward. He hit the snow, tearing up the earth, closing the distance in seconds. He wasn't running to fight. He was running to the fire. The heat inside the guest house was a physical weight, pressing down on Ariana's lungs. The moment the first window shattered from the heat, the roar of the fire drowned out the world. For Ariana, the sound wasn't just noise, it was a memory. The smell of burning pine and melting varnish transported her instantly back to that night 8 years ago, the night the Alpha's manor burned, taking her parents and her life with it. She was curled in the corner of the bathroom, the furthest room from the front door. She had thrown all the towels into the bathtub and turned the water on, soaking them. "Put these over your faces," she screamed, though her voice was barely a rasp in the smoke. She pressed wet towels over Chloe and Noah's faces. Liam was coughing violently, his eyes streaming tears. "Are we going to die?" Liam choked out. "No," Ariana lied. She grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the counter, gripping it tight. "If the fire comes in, we go out the window." But the window was small, high up, and barred, a security measure that had become a death trap. The floorboards in the hallway groaned and snapped. The fire was eating the structure alive. Ariana huddled over the children, using her body as a shield against the falling embers. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. She thought of the tall man with the storm cloud eyes. Silvio. She wished she had thanked him. She wished she had told him that for 1 hour he made her feel human again. Crash. The front wall of the cottage didn't just burn down, it exploded inward. Through the wall of orange flame, a massive shape emerged. It was a wolf, midnight black and terrifyingly huge. Its fur was singed, its eyes glowing like molten gold. "The king!" Liam shouted, his voice muffled by the wet towel. Silvio didn't stop moving. The floor beneath his massive paws was disintegrating. He leaped over a chasm of burning wood, landing heavily in the hallway. He reached the bathroom door. It was jammed by the heat, warping the frame. Silvio reared up on his hind legs and slammed his front paws against the wood. The door splintered into matchsticks. He filled the small room, his massive head lowered. He made a low, urgent woofing sound, nudging Ariana's shoulder with his wet nose. "Get on." The command was clear, telepathic in its intensity. Ariana didn't argue. "Liam, grab my neck! Noah, Chloe, hold on to his fur!" She scrambled onto the giant wolf's back, pulling Liam with her. Silvio crouched low, allowing the 2 smaller children to grip the thick fur of his mane. They were terrified, sobbing, but they held on with the desperation of the dying. Silvio turned. The hallway was gone. The roof was groaning, sagging dangerously low. A support beam, wreathed in flame, was swinging loose. Silvio didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the inferno. He moved with supernatural speed, bounding off the only remaining solid patches of floor. As they reached the living room, the ceiling gave way. A massive beam crashed down. Silvio saw it coming. He couldn't dodge it without throwing the children off. So he took it. He braced himself, letting the burning timber slam into his shoulder. The sound of the impact was sickening, a heavy thud and the sizzle of burning fur. A roar of pain tore from his throat, but he didn't buckle. He shoved upward, using his immense strength to throw the beam aside. With one final desperate leap, he smashed through the remaining wall and landed in the snow. He rolled, dipping his shoulder to let Ariana and the children slide off into the cold, wet drifts. Then he collapsed, panting heavily, steam rising from his scorched black coat. "Silvio!" Ariana screamed. She crawled toward him, her hands checking him frantically. "Silvio!" Around them, chaos erupted. The enforcers, the royal guard, and the pack members had formed a circle. Alpha Barik stood at the front, his face a mask of faux horror. "A tragedy!" Barik shouted, gesturing to the inferno. "A gas leak! I told the maintenance crew to check those lines. Oh, the poor Omega." Slowly the Black Wolf stood up. He shook himself, ash flying into the air. His golden eyes locked onto Barik. Bones cracked. The shift was violent and fast. Silvio stood naked in the snow, steam rolling off his skin. His shoulder was badly burned, the skin angry and red, but he didn't seem to feel it. Kyle, his second-in-command, ran forward and threw a heavy fur cloak over the king. Silvio didn't wrap it around himself. He walked over to Ariana, who was shivering on the ground, holding the weeping children. He draped the heavy fur over them. Then Silvio turned to Barik. He walked toward the alpha of Blackwood Ridge. He didn't run. He walked with the slow, inevitable pace of a glacier. "A gas leak?" Silvio asked. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. "Yes, my king," Barik stammered, stepping back. "Old pipes. A terrible accident. Thank the moon you saved them. Although, was it worth the risk? For a servant?" Silvio stopped 3 feet from Barik. He was a head taller than the other alpha. "Gideon," Silvio said, not looking away from Barik. "Yes." "My king?" The beta was trembling near the tree line. "You were seen running from the back of the cottage with a gas can. My enforcers intercepted you." 2 royal guards dragged Gideon out from the shadows. He was battered, bleeding, and handcuffed. Barik's face went pale. He went rogue! I didn't order this!" "Silence!" Silvio roared. The sound echoed off the mountains. Silvio turned to the assembled pack, nearly 300 wolves watching with wide eyes. "You have been lied to," Silvio bellowed. "For 8 years you have been lied to." He pointed a finger at Ariana, who was being helped to her feet by Kale. "You call her Omega. You call her runt. You let her starve. You let her scrub your floors while you ate the food her parents paid for." Silvio walked back to Kyle and grabbed the leather-bound book, the Alpha Lineage, that Kyle had rescued from the office. Silvio held it up. "This is the history of your pack," Silvio shouted. "Who remembers Alpha Richter?" A murmur went through the crowd. The older wolves nodded. Richter had been loved. "Who remembers his daughter? The child who was said to be brain-damaged in the fire?" Silvio walked over to Ariana. He grabbed her hand, her red, chapped, work-worn hand, and raised it high in the air. "Look at her," Silvio commanded. "Look past the dirt. Look past the bruises." An old woman in the front row, the pack's healer, squinted. She took a step forward. She gasped. "She has Seraphina's eyes," the old woman whispered. "Violet eyes." "This is not Ariana the Omega," Silvio announced, his voice ringing with authority. "This is Teresa Valerius, the rightful alpha of Blackwood Ridge. And Barik?" Silvio turned to the man who was now shaking uncontrollably. "Barik is a usurper, a child killer, and a traitor." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Then Barik laughed. It was a desperate, manic sound. "You think they care?" Barrick sneered, pulling a jagged hunting knife from his belt. "Look at her. She's broken. She can't shift. She has no wolf. A pack cannot be led by a cripple." Barrick raised his voice to his warriors. "I am your alpha. I fed you. I gave you strength. This stranger comes into our home and tries to install a cleaning lady as your queen. Kill him. Kill them all." For a second, nobody moved. Then, about 20 wolves, Barrick's loyalists, the ones who benefited from his corruption, stepped forward, growling. Silvio's royal guard raised their assault rifles. "No," Silvio said, holding up a hand. "No guns." He looked at Barrick. "You want to talk about strength, Barrick? You want to challenge her right to rule?" Silvio stepped aside, leaving Ariana standing alone in the center of the circle. "Ariana," Silvio said softly. She looked at him, terrified. "I can't fight him, Silvio. I don't have a wolf. It died in the fire." "It didn't die," Silvio whispered, touching her forehead. "It's just hiding. It's waiting for you to tell it that it's safe to come out. Call her." Barrick roared and charged. He didn't shift. He just ran at her with the knife, intent on slitting her throat before the king could intervene. "Ariana!" Liam screamed from the sidelines. Ariana saw the knife. She saw the man who had tormented her for 8 years. She saw the man who had hurt the children. Fear vanished, replaced by a cold, white-hot rage. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She opened her mouth, and a sound came out that wasn't human. It wasn't a wolf's howl either. It was a command. "Kneel!" It was the alpha voice, pure, undiluted, and ancient. The power of it slammed into Barrick like a physical wall. Mid-sprint, his knees buckled. He crashed into the snow, sliding to a halt at her feet, the knife flying from his hand. The entire pack gasped. The loyalists who had stepped forward whined and dropped to their bellies, forced down by the sheer pressure of the command. Ariana stood there, shocked. She looked at her hands. She felt it, a uncoiling in her chest. A heat, a presence. Her wolf wasn't dead. She had been guarding the door to Ariana's sanity. And now, the door was open. Barrick struggled against the invisible weight, pressing him into the snow. His nose was bleeding, a side effect of resisting a direct alpha command from a superior bloodline. "Witchcraft!" Barrick spat, trying to push himself up. "She's a witch!" "She is a Valerius," Silvio said, crossing his arms and leaning against a tree, watching with a dark satisfaction. "And she is done taking orders." Ariana looked down at Barrick. For the first time in years, she stood with her spine straight. The oversized coat Silvio had given the children was gone. She was just in her thin, torn leggings and hoodie, but she looked like a giant. "Stand up," Ariana said. Her voice was normal now, but it carried an edge of steel. Barrick scrambled to his feet, panting. "You think a parlor trick makes you alpha? I challenge you. The blood trial. Right here, right now. The blood trial. Old law. A fight to the death or submission for the leadership of the pack. If refused, the claimant forfeits their life." "She accepts," Silvio said immediately. "Silvio!" Ariana hissed, turning to him. "I can't shift. He will tear me apart." "He cannot shift either," Silvio said calmly. "Look at him." Ariana looked. Barrick was trying to shift, his skin rippling. But nothing was happening. "I have blocked his wolf," Silvio revealed casually. "My enforcers dosed his evening wine with wolfsbane mist. He is just a man. A man with a knife." Silvio walked over to Ariana. He pulled a long obsidian dagger from his boot. The hilt was wrapped in leather. "He killed your parents, Ariana. He enslaved you. He starved those children." Silvio pressed the handle of the dagger into her palm. "You don't need a wolf to take out the trash. You just need to remember who you are." Ariana gripped the dagger. It felt heavy, real. Barak saw the weapon. He snarled, picking up his own dropped hunting knife. "Fine," Barak sneered. "I'll gut you like the fish you are." He lunged. The fight was ugly. It wasn't the graceful dance of martial artists. It was a brawl in the snow. Barak was stronger, heavier. He slammed into Ariana, knocking the wind out of her. They rolled in the slush. Barak slashed wildly, the blade catching Ariana's forearm, drawing a line of bright red blood. The pain sharpened her focus. She rolled away, scrambling to her feet. Barak came at her again. Ariana dodged. She had spent 8 years dodging blows from cooks, guards, and drunk warriors. She knew how to move when someone wanted to hurt her. She ducked under his clumsy swing and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. Barak grunted, doubling over. Ariana didn't stop. She kicked his knee, hearing a satisfying pop. Barak howled and fell to one leg. "That was for Liam," she panted. Barak lashed out, cutting her shin. She stumbled. He grabbed her by the throat, squeezing. "Die, you little rat!" He spat, his face purple with exertion. Ariana's vision spotted. She clawed at his hands. She looked past him. She saw the children, Liam, Noah, Chloe, huddled under the fur cloak, watching her. They weren't looking away. They were watching her with total faith. She couldn't die. If she died, they died. Ariana let go of his hands and jammed her thumbs into his eyes. Barak screamed and let go, blinded momentarily. Ariana spun, gripping the obsidian dagger with both hands. She didn't aim for the heart. She aimed for the shoulder, the same place he had branded her. She drove the blade down. It sank deep into the muscle of his right shoulder. Barak shrieked, dropping his knife. Ariana withdrew the blade and kicked him in the chest. He fell onto his back, gasping, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Ariana stood over him, the bloody dagger in her hand, her chest heaving. "Yield," she commanded. "Never!" Barak spat blood at her. "I am the Alpha." "No," Ariana said. She looked up at the circle of wolves. "Who is your Alpha?" The pack looked from the bleeding man in the snow to the woman standing tall, with blood on her arm and fire in her eyes. Slowly, Roach, the cruel cook, stepped forward. He looked terrified. He dropped to his knees. "Alpha Ariana," he whispered. Then the old healer knelt. "Alpha Ariana." One by one, like dominoes, the pack fell to their knees. Even Barak's loyalists, seeing the tide turn, dropped their weapons and bowed. Only Silvio remained standing. He walked into the circle. He didn't bow. Kings do not bow to alphas. But he did something more shocking. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped the blood from Ariana's cheek. "Well fought," he murmured. Barak, seeing he had lost, tried one last coward's move. He reached for a hidden pistol in his ankle holster. Bang! The shot rang out instantly, but it wasn't Barak who fired. Silvio hadn't even looked. He had drawn his sidearm and fired a single shot into the snow, inches from Barak's hand, shattering the pistol grip. "Don't," Silvio warned, his voice bored. "The next one goes in your head." Silvio looked at Ariana. "What is your judgment, Alpha?" Ariana looked down at Barak. She could kill him. The law allowed it. He was a traitor. "Death is too easy," Ariana said, her voice cold. She pointed to the woods. "Exile," she declared. "Strip him of his rank. Strip him of his name. If he sets foot on Blackwood territory again, any wolf may hunt him for sport." Barak's eyes widened. For a wolf, exile was a slow death. It meant madness. It meant being a rogue. "Get him out of my sight," Ariana ordered. 2 enforcers dragged the screaming former Alpha away toward the boundary line. Ariana stood there, the adrenaline fading. Her knees began to shake. The cold rushed back in. She swayed. Silvio caught her before she hit the ground. He scooped her up into his arms effortlessly, holding her against his chest. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "The children," she mumbled, fighting unconsciousness. "Safe," Silvio promised. "They are all safe, and so are you." As he carried her toward the main pack house, her house, Silvio looked down at the woman in his arms. He had come here to inspect a failing pack. He had found a queen, and for the first time in his life, the Alpha King was thinking about staying. Spring came late to the Northern Territories, but when it arrived, it was violent in its beauty. 3 months had passed since the fire. The pack house no longer smelled of rot and boiled cabbage. It smelled of pine cleaner and roasting meat. In the Alpha's office, once a cave of conspiracy, Ariana sat behind the mahogany desk. She wasn't wearing rags. She wore a fitted black sweater, her hair clean and falling in soft waves. "The budget is balanced," Ariana said, looking up at Kale. "We can renovate the dormitories this month." "Good work, Alpha Ariana." Kyle bowed and left. Ariana slumped slightly. Leading was exhausting, but she wasn't alone. "They look happy," a deep voice rumbled. Silvio stood by the window, watching Liam, Noah, and Chloe playing soccer in the mud below. He had stayed for 3 months to oversee the transition, but the transition was over. The pack was stable. Ariana felt a pang of cold fear. He's going to leave. "They are safe because of you," she said, standing up. "Because of us," Silvio corrected gently. The air was thick with things unsaid. "I received a call from the council," Silvio said, watching her closely. "They are getting impatient. They want their king back." Ariana forced a smile that felt like glass shattering. "Of course. You've been here too long. I'll have the staff prepare your transport for the morning. The pups will miss you, but—" "Ariana!" Silvio crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed her waist, spinning her around and pinning her against the desk. It wasn't aggressive. It was desperate. "Stop talking about me leaving," he growled. "But you're the king," she whispered, her violet eyes wide. "A king is nothing without his queen," Silvio said, his thumb tracing the scar on her cheek. "I didn't stay for the politics. I stayed because the first time I saw you standing in the snow, defying the world for those children, my wolf didn't just see an alpha, he saw mine." "I'm broken, Silvio," she choked out. "I come with baggage. I come with 3 traumatized kids." "You aren't broken. You are forged," Silvio replied with blinding adoration. "And as for the children—" He pulled a folded document from his jacket and placed it on the desk. Ariana picked it up, her hands trembling. It was a legal adoption decree. Petitioners: Silvio Blackthorne and Teresa Valerius. Children: Liam, Noah, Chloe. "I don't want to just be their savior, Ariana. I want to be their father." He paused, smirking. "Also, I'm moving the capital here, to Blackwood Ridge, if the Alpha allows it." Ariana didn't answer with words. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him, a kiss of relief, passion, and a future that finally looked bright. "You!" They broke apart. Liam, Noah, and Chloe stood in the doorway. Liam looked disgusted. Chloe was giggling. "We wanted cookies," Noah said seriously. "But you guys are being gross." Silvio laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. He scooped the children up into a chaotic group hug. "Does this mean I have to call you Dad?" Liam asked, looking at the papers. "Only if you want to," Silvio promised. "But it means nobody will ever hurt you again." Ariana watched them, her family. She touched the branded R on her shoulder. It didn't stand for runt anymore. It stood for reborn. The long winter was over. The reign of the Alpha Queen had begun. And so, the Omega who scrubbed floors became the queen who ruled the North. Silvio and Ariana didn't just rebuild a pack, they built a family from the ashes of their trauma. It's a reminder that sometimes true strength isn't about how loud you can roar, but about how much you are willing to endure to protect the ones you love. Barrick roamed the wilderness as a rogue until his end, a ghost forgotten by history. But the legend of the orphaned pups and the king who knelt is told to every young wolf in the kingdom to this day. What do you think? Did Barrick deserve a harsher punishment, or is exile the ultimate torture for an alpha? Let me know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a saga like this one. We release new werewolf romances and fantasy dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep howling.